Welcome back to This is VANCOLOUR. Across the country, but especially here in BC, market rents are decreasing. And while homeownership is still out of reach for many, home prices are gradually grinding down, with more listings making it a clear buyer's market. But if you're a prospective first-time home buyer, is buying a home in BC even worth it? Or are you better off renting? Here to discuss, a VANCOLOUR fan favorite, real estate agent, market analyst, and advisor to policymakers. He has two popular YouTube shows, the Loonie Hour, which drops a new episode every Friday, and the Saretsky Show, which drops a new episode every Saturday. The founder of the Saretsky Group, Steve Saretsky.
Thanks for having me back on.
Steve, a pleasure to see you. Thanks for being here.
I'm surprised you keep inviting me.
Of course. No, you're a fan favorite, like I said. But I got to ask you about this housing market that we're in BC. We know that investors are pulling out of big development projects. We know that home prices are slipping lower and lower. So how bad is this market?
I think you have to look at it in like a couple different lenses. I think the resale market is really struggling. You know, last year in Greater Vancouver, we had a 25-year low in annual home sales. So it's
25 years,
25-year
wow. Okay.
low. So when you start adjusting for the population growth, it's bad.
It's a generational low.
It's a generational low. A lot of, I think that it is particularly dire. I think it's an existential moment actually for the development community. They've had it very good, obviously, for the last number of decades, but I think we're seeing a litany of insolvencies across the space, and housing starts, quite frankly, are going to fall off a cliff over the next 24 months.
Are you telling me that housing developers will not develop and make new projects unless there's a profit attached to it?
Yeah, apparently, yeah. The pro formas, they don't work anymore.
Yeah.
I think that the numbers obviously got so inflated. And what we saw was a widening gap between the cost of new construction and the resale market. Right. As resale prices drop, developers can only adjust their prices so much before the banks say, hold on a minute, this doesn't work anymore. So what we're seeing today is an inability to pre-sell, and an inability to pre-sell results in no construction financing and no new housing getting built.
So if you're in the market to buy your first home, this should be good news, right? So are we seeing homes become affordable for more people?
Yeah, it's, the irony around housing affordability is prices need to fall for prices to become affordable.
Yeah.
Either that or your incomes need to go up significantly. So I think what we're seeing is, National Bank put out a report showing that housing affordability has actually been improving for 7 consecutive quarters, which I think is the first time since like the 1980s. So it's
again generational.
So
some of this sounds kind of good.
Yeah, I think if you're a buyer today, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say home prices today are affordable, but they are getting more affordable.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at it again statistically, 25-year low in home sales typically results in a pretty good time to buy. There's no competition. There's no multiple offers. You can go in there. You can negotiate terms. You can grind on the prices. So in terms of like conditions favoring the buyer, I don't know if they get a whole lot better than this.
And especially when you have home listings, basically inventory, piling on top of each other. And we know that not only is there a population slowdown, but people are leaving British Columbia. The population is decreasing. It sounds really good for buyers, right?
Yeah. So the first time in history that BC's population has actually contracted. So you have a contracting population, you have falling home prices, falling rents. So by and large, things are getting much more affordable, and the market conditions obviously favor that.
How much lower will the market go? Because that's, I think, the big thing for buyers is, if it's going to collapse anytime soon, you don't want to, or you want to wait for that collapse. You want to buy the dip.
Yeah, I think that it's always hard to pinpoint the bottom. I think truthfully, the trajectory for the back half of this year is I think we're going to see gradually lower home prices. I think that's kind of what's on the radar. I think what you see today, you have about 7 months of inventory on the resale market today. But I think the thing that's maybe not talked about, and this is why I brought up the new construction space, is you actually have 11,000 unsold units sitting on developer balance sheets today.
Wow.
So those 11,000 units typically don't show up in the MLS stats. So when you hear the real estate board say, oh, there's this much of inventory for sale, 7 months of supply, that's not including the unsold inventory on the developer balance sheets.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the listings or the unsold inventory is actually a lot higher than what the numbers present.
Yeah, correct. So developers typically, if you have a building for sale and you have 50 units available to sell, you don't typically put 50 units on the MLS, right? You wouldn't be doing yourself any favors. So you might, as a developer, you might put 2, 3, 4 units on the MLS to say, hey guys, listen, we're available. We have some units for sale. Meanwhile, they still have another 45 off, on the book. So you got to come into the presentation center and they'll let you know what they have.
So then the big question is buying a home in British Columbia, does that still make financial sense? Because we know that obviously rents are going down, but at this moment in time, if you're a buyer, should you get in there or should you maybe wait?
I think that the reality is, I think if you look at it from like a price to rent ratio, I think renting financially technically makes more sense.
Okay.
I think the reality is when you're renting, most people don't actually, invest the difference, right? If it's cheaper for you to rent, let's say it's $3,000 a month to rent, but to own it is $4,000 with the cost of maintenance and all that stuff. I think the reality is people don't actually save that extra $1,000 and invest it.
Right.
So I think that home ownership still is a vehicle for long-term wealth because it is forced savings, right? You're paying down your mortgage every single month. And I think that typically speaking, you'll get some price appreciation over a long enough time horizon. I think ultimately over the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen no price growth.
There is a lot of cost associated with home ownership, though, your property taxes, maintenance, things that you wouldn't have to pay for if you were renting, right? So if you were investing whatever that cost differential is, it does make sense in a maybe short term or medium term. Yeah,
I think if you take your down payment, let's say your down payment's $200,000, you invest that in the market, you're saving another $1,000, $1,500 a month in your monthly carrying cost. If you take that $1,500, invest it in the market, start earning, whatever 6, 7, 8%. Obviously, in theory, I think that you'd do quite well. I think the reality is I don't think a lot of people do that. I think it takes a little bit of
discipline.
Yeah, and I think that most people don't have discipline.
Yeah.
So I think that home ownership obviously is proven to be a wealth generator, even though, like you said, it does have a lot of costs. I don't think people really put into their spreadsheets. Do you know what I mean? Like the cost of replacing a roof, windows, furnaces break down. So the cost of home ownership, it is expensive.
Yeah. Is home ownership going to become a lifestyle choice at this point? Or do you think we're going to get to a point where, again, it is going to be something that people really do aspire to or they see the financial benefit of?
I think if you look at like any survey with young people, most of them still aspire, the vast majority of them still aspire to be homeowners. I think though we are shifting into, or I think we are in a new era though, where more and more people will rent, not only because they can't afford it. I think the biggest challenge is getting the down payment, but if you look at what's happening in the real estate market, as we talked about earlier, there's no one building pre-sale units because there's no demand. And so what we're seeing is the government has actually really spurred on the construction of rental building. So we're now creating a record number of rental units under construction, purpose-built rentals, because basically these developers and these institutions are now saying, hey, listen, more and more people are going to be renting. And so they're building rental apartment buildings. And we have, I think in BC, for example, I think we have close to 10% of all existing stock is currently under construction on the rental side. So there is a lot of rent supply coming. And that's why rents are down anywhere from 10% to 25% in the suburbs today.
Wow. And if someone is in the market, they value home ownership, they think it's a good time to buy, they come to you, right?
Yeah, you come to me. Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's funny as a realtor, it's like always a good time to buy and sell. Well, it's got to be one or the other. I think today it's not a good time to sell. If you have to sell, you have to sell. You have to take the market price. But as a buyer today, statistically speaking, you can look at the sales to actives ratio. That's probably your best metric if you're a buyer and looking for a stat point to point to. And I think it's around 7 or 8% today, which is the lowest historically it's been since, I think, 2012.
Yeah.
So it's never been a better time since 2012.
Never a better time to chat with you, Steve. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Folks, follow him on social media and YouTube to catch the Loonie Hour and the Saretsky Show, a wealth of insight. He is, of course, Steve Saretsky. Now, after some business, you might have a car that can drive itself, but can you actually let it chauffeur you around in BC? And what would happen if you tried? Kyla Lee will give us her verdict up next.